One of the concepts here um, is, there's different types of rights. There's negative rights, positive rights, which I think we'll talk about here in a minute. We'll talk about later in this module. But there's also a difference between like natural rights and civil rights. Natural rights are rights that basically are granted by nature. They either come from God or they're something inexplicable, the force of nature. Insofar as you are a creature, your job is your job as a living creature is to live your life and to reproduce and to have more offspring so that the species continues. And so rights are granted to a thing so that it is able to continue its function through nature, or it's able to continue its function that God intended it, that God gives us certain rights. The other side is that there's also civil rights. Civil rights are the idea that these are rights that are granted by society. The government gives them. They say, okay, maybe they're born out of a sense of nature, but they're also born out of a sense of what do I want as a moral agent. And so we grant everybody rights, and those are granted by civilization, by society. And that's what we call civil rights. Now, as far as it goes, there are philosophers who spend considerable time with natural rights. And there's also a lot of people who talk about what civil rights are, how we construct them, how we enforce them, how we interpret them, how you deal with rights conflicts between people. And that there's a lot that goes into rights approach to ethics. A lot of it ends up being kind of social political philosophy or legal philosophy, but it's kind of on the fringe of the ethical area. It is a moral or a value theory rights approach is. Now, like Jeremy Bentham, he thought natural rights were ridiculous. The reality is that even if rights are given by nature or by God, the government can make decisions however it wants. The society can come in and go, well, we no longer want you to have these rights. I mean, suppose you believe people have a right to drink alcohol. Well, it's nature, it's a natural product, and so people have a right to consume natural products. Well, if the government decides prohibition to put in place, those rights disappear. And so essentially, the rights that are granted by nature are hard to interpret, they're hard to determine, and society ultimately is going to be the one who decides what rights you have. So to sit around and talk about natural rights and what you should have from nature is somewhat ridiculous. Now, the idea of civil rights, though, is that there's kind of this idea that rights are about creating equality, that it's about treating equals equally and unequals unequally. And the idea there is those who are normal people need to be given an equal share, equal chance at life, at happiness, at success. But those who lack the ability should be given opportunities. That's the job of civil rights, is to recognize that a person who has autism or who has a learning disability or a person who has a physical defect, I shouldn't say defect, has a physical disability, has a physical limitation, that they should be given access in our society, which is why we have the American with Disabilities Act that allows for people to have equal access. It's not something that I, as a person who's capable of walking up and down steps, needs, but an elevator is something that is important to provide for those who are unequal, that they don't have that same option to walk up and down steps. At the same time, we do this for like providing special education, providing resources for orphans and others, and that's what society does. It's protecting the rights of the individual, but it's also recognizing that some people need extra help, and that's not wrong, that's not unfair, that's simply giving everybody an even playing field. And the other side of the coin is that unequals unequally might be that somebody who is particularly gifted, somebody who is particularly capable, somebody who has extra things, we may actually ask them to carry more. If somebody comes from a life, has lots of money, we may ask them to pay more in taxes. If somebody has, extra physical abilities, perhaps we ask them to do more work, things like that. Now, the case is this is a little bit controversial on how you treat unequals unequally. How do you afford extra rights to people? Because a lot of people are really concerned with only treating equals equally. They don't bother to, but I think what oftentimes happens is nobody is across the board normal, right? I mean, I have no I'm really good at mathematics. never been in, never not taken math very much in other than logic and philosophy, and I've not really done much with math beyond high school, but I like math. I'm good at it, right? I mean, you can give me math problems, you can explain mathematical concepts. I enjoy math. Okay, don't do anything with it. I am really good at ideas. I'm really good at concepts. But, emotionally, like on an emotional level, I'm probably not as in touch with my feelings as other people are. I'm not musically inclined. I lack a lot of I lack fine motor skills, things like that. And so nobody is equal all the way across. And so one thing I want to keep in mind, as I talk about this, I'm not trying to get into a debatable issue of, you just want to help out the less advantaged, and take from those who have stuff, things like that. I'm just saying that there are cases where all of us have benefited from society. All of us have benefited from, whether it be good parents or loving teachers or loving parents, loving grandparents, a neighbor who is supportive and helpful. All of us have limitations that we benefit from, that we end up getting extra help from. And the idea there is I think oftentimes when you talk about rights and you're all worried about treating equals equally and not worried about sort of more the positive rights approach, which is giving opportunity to those who are unequal, I think what you do is you fail to recognize that you have benefited from a lot of gifts, and that other people who don't have those gifts should get some help. And that's all because that's the only way they're going to be on equal footing with you. And while I need extra help in understanding things like music or dancing, and so people need to perhaps, maybe there should be, I'm joking about needing a program for that, but I lack motor skills, things like that. But those are all kind of physiological intelligences. But we all have our own limitations, and we all have our own things, and we all benefit from society and from our parents, our people, and we need to recognize that. And that's what civil rights should do, is they should provide a level playing field. That way everybody has equal access.